We're currently in Italy and we're filming a world famous figure skater on the ice, and we brought a ton of equipment. We actually drove 7 hours and arrived at 4:30 a.m. and had to film at 5:30 a.m. So the first night was completely sleepless, and that threw off my entire content plan for YouTube. So I planned some comparisons between some lenses, which I will still do. But for now, I want to talk to you about another big topic that is in my head for quite a while now, and it's giving me a massive headache. And that is finding the perfect B-cam to our A-cam. Our current A-cam is the Canon C300 Mark III, and that's the camera that Belle is filming me on right now. So I will talk about what I think is a perfect B-cam for the Canon C Cinema line a little later, but back up for now and talk about a B-cam in general, because that is a topic that comes up in various Facebook groups all over the internet, and it doesn't really matter what your A-cam looks like. So let's talk about what I'm looking for in a B-cam in general. Our A-cam is the camera that I'm using for pretty much everything, even for vlogging like this when I have a second person, but also for all of our productions, for YouTube B-roll, etc. The problem is that I do need a B-cam for various situations. One might be that we are filming a 2-angle interview and I just want to have a second angle, but another is that we need a hybrid cam. I'm not doing too much photography, but we do photography once in a while for our Instagram account, and if you want to follow us, here is our handle. But I'm also using this for sports photography. Mainly Belle is using this for her figure skating work, so something with a high frame rate is optimal but not necessarily needed. But in general, I want to have a hybrid camera that does everything. Also, one big topic is that this camera needs to be very small. So a lot of people say like, hey, you have a C500 or a C300, so why not take a C200 as a B-cam? No, because that kind of defeats the purpose. For example, we were in Abu Dhabi 2 years ago and we were filming some travel videos for a contest. And they didn't let us in with the Canon C200 in the Louvre, for example, or in other public places. So we did need a small camera that is not that attention-seeking, and that is something that I'm looking for in a B-cam. Another big advantage of having a second camera that is much smaller than your A-cam is gimbal work. Usually 90% of the times I'm filming handheld, but there are certain situations where you do need a gimbal, and I've been trying to get the C300 as well as the C500 on the Crane 3S, and honestly this has been really frustrating up until this point, but I will definitely do a full review on this later. So ideally on a shoot, I would have my C300 as my main cam shooting handheld, and then at all times I would have a smaller body on a gimbal that I can use for the shots that I need it for. But that kind of requires that my B-cam matches my A-cam almost to a T. And the biggest thing when it comes to that is the dynamic range, because I think this is a dead giveaway when you're trying to match cameras. Most people are worried about the colors not matching, but I think you can easily match colors in post if you know what you're doing. But when it comes to dynamic range, you're kind of out of luck most of the times. Especially with our C300, it has an amazing dynamic range. So compare this to our current B-cam, which is the EOS R. It immediately becomes apparent when you're switching between the two cameras, because the EOS R really lacks in a dynamic range department. So ideally I would have a B-cam that is at least close to the dynamic range of my A-cam. So to sum it all up, I want a B-cam that is much smaller than my A-cam, that is a hybrid camera, so it has decent photography features and matches the image quality of my A-cam at least to a certain degree. And the last thing I want to mention is that I really wanted to have the same lenses, because that is a problem when traveling, and we are traveling a lot, so I really want to travel light, and having two sets of lenses is definitely something that is a no-go for me. So I can't really match my Canon to my Sony lenses or a Fuji if I have to bring a different set of lenses every time. Okay, now that we've established what I'm looking for in a B-cam, let's talk about actual cameras that are out right now. And my choice kind of falls to the EOS R5, the EOS R6, as well as the Sony A7sIII. And why is that? Because all of these three cameras in theory have a matching image quality to my Canon C300 Mark III, and they also feature a really decent autofocus. And that is something that I'm looking forward to when using the camera on a gimbal. So let's start with the R5. And in theory, the R5 could be the perfect BCam for everything that I'm looking for in a BCam in general. So the problem with the R5 is, well, we all kind of know what the problems with the R5 are. And one scenario that I didn't even mention when I was talking about the BCam is that I also want to use it as a behind the scenes cam for our YouTube channel. So the requirements would be to have at least 4K 60 so that I can film some crisp B-roll in slow motion. And I also want to have the photography side for some thumbnails or just our Instagram content. The problem with the R5 is that even in 4K 60, it overheats. So sometimes you just film a little bit of B-roll, shoot some pictures, and apparently, I haven't used the R5 in an extension yet, it may actually happen that you can't film anything at all. And in all kinds of scenarios that I want to be used this camera in, that is a deal breaker. Another thing is the lack of dynamic range, because apparently the R5 doesn't really feature a lot more dynamic range than our original EOS R, and that for me is a problem. But yes, there is rumors out there that Canon might actually implement C-Log 3 in an upcoming firmware update, which would bring the dynamic range a little closer to the C300, up to a point where I would actually use it as a BCam when it comes to dynamic range. Speaking of firmware upgrades that might actually improve the R5, from everything that I've read online right now is that the overheating in the R5 is actually artificially implemented. And in the beginning I thought like, hey, this wouldn't even be that much of a problem because Bell is filming on the ice a lot, and on the ice obviously the R5 shouldn't overheat, but from everything that I've seen you could put the R5 in the freezer and it would still overheat because the overheating is artificial. So that means that Canon could actually bring out a firmware update that might improve on the Canon EOS R5. So in theory, yes, in the future the R5 could be an amazing, maybe even the perfect BCam to our C300 Mark III. But as of right now, it just isn't. Okay, so now let's talk about the R6. And pretty much all the problems that I had with the R5 are there with the R6 as well. Because it still overheats at 4K 60 and the dynamic range is pretty much the same. Again, could be improved in the future. So the R6 might actually be an even better BCam because it's just cheaper. But as of right now, same goes for the R6. It's not the perfect BCam right now. So now let's talk about the Sony A7sIII. And from everything that I have seen on the internet, this camera might actually be the perfect camera out of all cameras and might actually be a great fit for an A camera. Granted, there's stuff that I don't really like about the camera, especially the form factor and some minor things, but I will talk about this camera when I actually have this camera in hand in the near future. But as a BCam, this could actually be a great option as well. But there's obviously two things that I don't like about the Sony, and number one is the color matching. I've already said that in the beginning that you could easily match colors when you know what you're doing, and I've worked with Sony cameras and matched them to Canon cameras in the past, and especially with our custom LUT packs that are especially designed to kind of match these two cameras together. This shouldn't be too much of a problem, and there's a link in the description below if you want to check them out. But the biggest gripe that I have with the Sony A7sIII is the lens mount, because yes, I can just adapt my EF lenses via an adapter and just use all my existing lenses on the Sony A7sIII. But to my understanding, I lose a lot of autofocus capabilities, like the tracking or the eye autofocus. And spending 4,200 euros on a camera and then not have the autofocus features, especially when I do like to have them when I'm using it on a gimbal, is kind of a no-go as well. So as soon as I get the A7sIII, I will try it with an adapter and will try if my existing EF lenses are actually a great fit for the Sony camera, and if they are, this might actually be, as it stands right now, the perfect B camera for our use case. But again, this will have to lead to some testing. So as of right now, what am I doing? I have absolutely no idea, and I will continue to use the EOS R for now until I actually get my hands on all these cameras, and we'll see how future firmware updates or the adapters play out in the future.
But what about me?
Yeah, that's the thing, because again, Bell also needs a camera, and that...
So now I'm speaking, because I think Damien didn't express my frustration about the EOS R enough. This camera was a good camera for me. It was my first real camera that I bought with my money when I opened up my business. But as of right now, I realize that the quality and the noise is just too much in this camera. And also, if I shoot a lot of wide angle with this camera, you see that there is not so much information. So I just need one camera that I can put on a gimbal, that I can skate with on the ice and do fast movements right now. And the C300 is a great camera, but it's really heavy and I cannot move and be as flexible as with the EOS R. So maybe the Sony is the camera for me, and I want to find out, but then there is the problem with the lenses, so we really don't know what to do. That's all I wanted to say.
So right now, I'll be honest with you, it's giving me a headache, and I have no idea what we're choosing for a great camera for Belle for her line of work, as well as a BCam to our C300 Mark III. And I will keep you updated in all of the videos that I will do about all the cameras that I just talked about, because those are the cameras that interest me the most, and I will do full reviews on all of them. So subscribe to our channel if you want to see any of these videos. And I think I've talked enough. I nearly killed myself climbing down that hill, and I think we're just trying to get something to eat now, and I'll keep you updated on our Italy trip in the near future, and I hope to see you on the next one.